Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this episode, we're going to take you to the movies downtown. I'm guessing here, but I would think there aren't that many theaters downtown anymore. There just isn't the space for those big 10-screen multiplexes. But if there are theaters downtown, they are likely to be independent businesses offering a unique service to film buffs. For over a decade, our guest has owned one of these independents. It's called The Screening Room, and it is located in downtown Kingston. She joins me to talk about her passion for bringing all kinds of movies to her big screens. Her name is Wendy Huot. Welcome, Wendy.
Hi, Dave. It's good talking to you.
Thanks very much for being a part of the podcast. And we are going to begin by reminding our listeners that we are taping this particular recording in late November 2022. So let's start with this. Why don't you give us a brief description of the screening room?
All right. Let's see. Brief. That
brief.
Might be a challenge.
We'll do the history part in a bit, but
yes.
just a brief description.
Yeah. So the screening room, we are a movie theater with 3 screens. We're located right in the heart of downtown Kingston on Princess Street, up on the 2nd floor. And I will note that we are the theater only dates back to the late 90s, but we are in a historic building, which is the Stasis department store building. And so we're a regular movie theater. We're open 363 days a year. We close for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and that's it. In any given week, we'll often be playing 7, 8, or 9 different movies. And our specialty is in playing films that you might not see anywhere else in the region, whether they're, foreign films, art house, indie, cult movies, often really like story and character-driven movies that don't play as blockbusters at the multiplex, but just really deliver the goods, movies that I personally love and our moviegoers really love. We also play films second run. So that might be some of the best Hollywood films that first play at the multiplexes. We'll bring them downtown afterwards. We play classic films. We do a lot of special event screenings, maybe with filmmaker Q&As or discussions after the screenings. And I'd say the movie-going experience is definitely quite a bit different at the screening room than it is at the multiplexes. Each of our auditoriums is a bit smaller, but the atmosphere is, how to describe it? I'm trying to think what kind of perspective I have. It's very idiosyncratic, unique, something you would only see in Kingston, maybe a little bit more old-fashioned in some ways, a bit of a throwback to maybe what moviegoing was, like in the 20th century. Some people say before it became corrupted by current trends. And, you can buy, when we serve tea, we serve it in a bone china mug. Our snack bar prices are much more reasonable. Our popcorn is delicious. We cook it in coconut oil. And of course, at the screening room, we serve real butter, not the fake butter topping, and it's free. We don't charge extra for it. And we have, when it comes to our signage and a lot of the decorations we have in our lobby, they're like original art pieces that are commissioned from artists in Kingston, and all of our gift passes and just all the media that we make, whether print or digital, it's all, designed locally with our own, little je ne sais quoi, personality. Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit more later on about the way people are getting their movies these days, because obviously way back when it was only the movie theaters where you could watch the big movies, and then they made their way to television, and then they made their way to DVDs and Blu-rays and streaming now. So we'll get to that in a minute. I want to focus a little bit now on just why you decided to get into this. Did you work at the screening room before you decided to buy the place?
Yeah, so that's a great question. My origin story is a little bit different than maybe what a lot of people might assume. So I before I owned the screening room, I have to admit I never actually worked in a movie theater before, but I did for 5 years run this zero budget underground film screening series in Kingston called Cameo Cinema. So when I first moved to Kingston, 2006, I moved from Victoria, I'm a West Coaster. Anyways, I moved to Kingston to work at Queen's University as a librarian. I was a web development librarian. I was fresh out of library school. I didn't know anyone in Kingston, let alone Ontario. But something I did to, become more connected to other people in Kingston was host this film screening series, Cameo Cinema, where I would find somebody who had a particular film that was a favorite film of theirs that they wanted to share with an audience, and I would have them choose the film, then we would play it, and they'd give a personal introduction to the movie. So I must have done maybe about 40 or 50 of these screenings over 5 years. And, it was, digital projector, folding chairs, really a zero budget thing, but it was a real labor of love. So when I was coming up to the 5-year mark of my job at Queen's, I thought, okay, this is the first job of my career. I want to seriously, do I want to continue doing this forever, or should I entertain something else? Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe if I could do anything, blue sky, without any concern for what's practical, if I could do anything for work, like, you know what, I would love to run a movie theater. I love movies. I love going to movie theaters. And maybe that would be my dream job. Anyways, I was sharing this dream with a friend, my friend Sina, who's a real estate agent. And he said, oh, if you want to run a movie theater, the screening room is for sale. I said, what? No, what? It's for sale? What do you mean? Why would anyone who owns a movie theater ever want to sell it? And the screening room had been around since the late 90s. Now, this was in 2011, and it went up for sale. And as soon as I heard it was available, I was like, this is fate. I need to be the one to take over the movie theater. I just have this conviction that I could do a really good job of it. And of course, this is very idealistic and pretty naive, given that I'd never actually worked in a movie theater before. But I'm someone who, whenever I'd go on holidays or travel, any city or any town, I'd always seek out the movie theater and go see a movie, whatever movie theaters I was in any proximity to. So I feel like I did have a pretty, even if not really understanding the behind scenes thing, I had a pretty, good sense of what a movie theater can be like, and it's like a vision for it. Anyway, so as soon as I found out it was for sale, bought the theater from the previous owner, Terry, who was ready to get out of the business, understandably so. And that was 11 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since.
Now, the screening room, as you said, got established in the early 1990s. Now, give us a bit of background on how that all evolved. Where did it start?
Yeah. So actually, I don't actually have an exact opening year for it, but I believe it'd be 1997 or 1998. It was established by Dan Wanamaker, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he was the force behind the drive-in movie theater at Kingston Family Fun World. And
this is the outfit out on McAdoo's Lane?
Yes. Okay. So he had been running the drive-in movie theater for a number of years. He understood movie business. He wanted to open a movie theater downtown. So we found this space for rent on our building, 120 Princess Street, second floor of a former department store. And there was an escalator in the building at the time, which is very unusual for downtown Kingston. And it hadn't been, I believe that the department store had closed down in 1886. And there's a few businesses that had operated in the building. But anyways, there was vacant space. And one thing that's great about the building we're located in is that it's attached to the parking garage on Brock Street, corner of Brock and Millington.
Okay.
And I'm sure this was a key factor when Dan chose the space, because you can actually park in the parking garage and then walk right into the theater without having to step foot on, in the rain or step on any ice or snow. So we probably actually have like the best parking arrangement of any business in Kingston, really. Anyway, sorry, that's an aside.
Anyway, a good aside,
Dan, so Dan put in, so he thought, okay, let's put in a movie theater downtown. The concept is that it would be a discount second run movie theater playing all, Hollywood second run films, a lot of family friendly movies, and really cheap tickets. I think it was $4 for a general admission ticket. But he sold submarine sandwiches and full food offerings at the snack bar, not just popcorn and soda. And it was called Super Flicks and Food. And I think that business model was not entirely successful out of the gate. And after a few years, I remember, so I've heard that then, well, Alex Jansen, he took over as a manager at the screening room. And if the name Alex Jansen is familiar, he went on to establish the Kingston Canadian Film Festival at the screening room while he was working there. And really, really dynamic guy who's done all kinds of interesting projects really to film in both Kingston and Toronto. Anyways, he was involved in remaking the theater from being Super Flicks and Food to the screening room. And under the name of the screening room, rather than just discount second run, be a theater that was focused on playing the more art house specialty content that film buffs love, because that niche, that real like art house independent theater niche, had been left vacant by the Princess Court Theater. Now, Princess Court Theater was before my time. Again, I moved to Kingston in 2006, but I've heard quite a bit about it. It was a not-for-profit movie theater that played art house films and did all kinds of special events and had an incredible calendar of films. And it ran from the 80s to the mid-90s, and it was located further up Princess Street, kind of in the area known as the Hub. It might be apartments now. Anyways, that theater had been filling that film buff niche. When they closed in the mid-90s, the niche went vacant. And anyways, that Super Flicks and Food in the screening room, they realized that they could actually play these, that there was actually, rather than playing Hollywood films, there was actually more of an audience for some of these, smaller international films. So, so that was around 2000 it became the screening room. And so that's a bit of the history.
Why do you think there is so much focus, like if you talk about what Dan's initial dream was to reestablish a movie theater in downtown Kingston? Why is it important to have a theater in a downtown, whether it's Kingston or somewhere else?
Well, hugely important. For starters, I'll say that I did not get my driver's license until I was in my early 30s. For the first few years of running the screening room, I did not have a driver's license. So I was always lived within, easy walking distance of the downtown. I think initially my commute to the screening room was like a 5-minute walk. And so anyways, as somebody who's a lifelong avid moviegoer, I always lived fairly close to downtown, and I would just, walk to the movie theater, take the bus. And of course, if you're, dinner and a movie, it's classic.
Yeah.
Well, not classic. It's like, who doesn't want that? Combining movie going with just being downtown, whether it's going to a restaurant or a bar or shopping before and afterwards, meeting up with a friend for coffee, before or after the movie, a coffee shop nearby. I don't know. It's just better, I think, to watch a movie downtown than it is in a shopping center. Although, of course, the big advantage that, say the Cineplex or the Landmark have, one of the advantages is that, of course, they have great parking, great ample free parking, and, you are on good driving routes. It's very car friendly. But it's a whole other experience going to the movies downtown. And of course, movie theaters were good for, driving economic development and driving business to local shops and restaurants. I think even when people are considering whether they want to live downtown, in a condo or an apartment, I think if there is a good movie theater downtown, it's hard to I think I do want to live a downtown lifestyle. Maybe I'll go to the movie theaters every week. So I know that it can be good for just, increasing population density downtown. Here we go. This is, I shouldn't go too far down this economic development spiel. This seems a little too, I'm applying for a grant or something.
Well, you see, I'm going to take you down that road a little further myself, because I was just going to ask this question, is that I know that Kingston is probably not unlike a lot of other cities where they are encouraging people to move to the core of the city.
Yeah.
So in Kingston right now, we know that there is this thing called intensification, where they want to build more condos, have more apartments for people to live in, so that they can get their services all in one space and they don't need two vehicles, for instance. which helps out the environment. And I know that there are plans that the city council has to develop different parts of the city. So, I mean, you're sitting right in the middle of all of this. So it can't be anything but good for future growth of your potential audience if more and more people are moving downtown. And I'm sure that's at the back of your mind.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, once you live someplace and you're only a few minute walk away from the movie theater, all of a sudden the trade-off, or not the trade-off, the decision between whether to watch a movie on your couch at home on Netflix or whatever, versus, just getting some fresh air, going for a little jaunt down to the movie theater and seeing a movie with a bunch of other, film lovers, it's becomes a much easier decision to make. And two, I think, one thing about movie theaters, everybody loves movie theaters. And even if you don't go to the movies all that often, or even if you haven't gone to a movie theater for years, it's really nice knowing that you have the option of catching a movie at the movie theater, because we are a sort of like an entertainment option. I mean, movie going, it's pretty affordable compared to, almost, our tickets. If you're a member, it costs $10, including tax, to see a film at the screening room. So $10 for a few hours entertainment in the company of other people. It's affordable. It's safe for someone who's new to town or even just visiting and maybe don't know anyone. You can go see a movie by yourself and you don't need to feel too weird or self-conscious about that. It's not like you need to know someone or feel like you belong to some part of a club or cultural scene to go to the movie theater. It's very, in that way, culturally accessible space. And, we're a form of particularly like nightlife that doesn't need to involve drinking alcohol, which I think is really, really important. So I think even if somebody isn't necessarily an avid moviegoer, it's always nice to know that you have that as an option, because it's not, I don't know. In some ways, I feel like we don't actually have a lot of competition. Our experience really is so different from what else you could be doing downtown, and I think we really complement other businesses rather than being in any kind of competition.
Now, like any other new owner of a business, you walk in the front door and you go, okay, what do I need to make a change to the establishment to make it better now that I own the place? And aside from having the best popcorn in town, and this is something that someone told me about your particular establishment, and he's Stephen Lee Naish. I don't know if you know who he is.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
He was the guy who told me to call you. And he told me the first thing he said about the theater was the best popcorn in town. So what did you do to the business, to the look of the place, to the inside of the place when you took over?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because, the thing when I took over, I think it was doing a really solid job of bringing movies to town that you wouldn't see anywhere else. I think the programming was quite good, and it was quite in tune with what the, screening room's audience wanted to see. But in terms of I think the comfort of the theater and atmosphere of the theater, there was a lot of room for improvement. I don't know how many people listening can picture the purple lobby, and the seats weren't very comfortable. The sound was mono sound. Both theaters was just one large speaker at the front of the theater. So not even surround sound. It was mono sound, not even stereo.
Just coming straight at you.
Yeah. And, the theater was not accessible at all. It was possibly the least accessible business in Kingston, physically. You'd have to go upstairs to get there. And even in the washrooms, even the toilets, the washrooms, you had to go up a little step and sit on them. Very, very unusual. And so I had when I first took over, I had a lot of ideas about how to improve the ambiance of the theater, maybe elevate some of the drink and candy options, improve the technology, put a wonderful marquee out front on Princess Street, and advertise the theater better, and overhaul the website. I had all these ideas. And I remember thinking here's my list of projects. This is what I'll be taking on over the next 6 months. I'm laughing as probably any either new business owner or new homeowner.
This is after I win the lottery.
Yeah. And two, I'm not just money, but even just being limited in terms of time. because, movie theater open 7 days a week, several hours each day, just keeping maintaining the operation of having people coming in, lots of people coming in through the doors every day, several movies coming through the theater every week. Just keeping up with operations, consumed most of my time. And anyway, so it took years to really make a lot of the kind of bigger improvements I wanted to make. We did a major renovation in 2017, 2018, in which was one massive project in which I was able to check, 50 little projects off the list and kind of solve 50 problems all at once. But I would say, sorry, this is a very long answer to your question, but in terms of, I took over the theater, what my kind of number one, putting a personal stamp on it priority project was to start playing classic films at the screening room, because at the time there's almost no way to watch older movies in the movie theater in Kingston. And when I think about some of my own favorite movie going experiences in Vancouver or Victoria, or in visiting cities like Portland or Toronto or Ottawa, one of my best memories have been discovering or rediscovering an older film that would be, at least a few decades old, seeing it, in a movie theater on the big screen with other people as an event. Every movie theater screening is an event in a sense. Like, it's not like watching TV or watching something on streaming where you could choose the start time and you can pause the playback at any time. To watch a film like The Last Waltz at the Bytown in Ottawa on, when would I have seen that? Would have been 2009 in a rainy Saturday night in November. Like, that is a specific event that will never happen again in quite the same way. And so it doesn't matter, for me, it doesn't matter if the film is new. Sometimes I think if a film is older too, when you have that sense of rediscovery or that sense of traveling back in time, I think that that can be even more magical. So anyways, playing classic films on the big screen was my number one priority. And when we first started doing it, we had to do it in a really kind of scrappy way with, fairly inexpensive digital projectors that resided alongside the 35 millimeter, celluloid film projectors that we were using at the time. And our way of doing it initially was pretty scrappy, but it's something that we've, I've kept up since, the beginning in 2011. And I'm really proud to say, actually, that when it comes to our, classic film programming that we run under the name Cinematica, it's actually never been more popular. And I think part of that is because we've just kept at it for years, and we've built up this audience of people who love the experience of seeing a movie in the movie theater that, they know they could watch at home, but they know it's different in the theater. And also, I think even there's something about post-COVID, something about the interest of a lot of younger people and a lot of students even. You'd be surprised. But particularly we're noticing with a lot of younger people in their 20s, they, they're keen to show up and watch a film from the 70s or 80s or 90s with their friends in the theater. So there's something going on there. I'm glad that our classic film screenings are actually kind of making money now.
Which is always good.
Yeah.
What I'd like to know is, let's go back a little bit to you sitting down in the theater when you first get in there after you've bought the place and you've got all of these ideas in the back of your head. My question is, where did all of these ideas come from? In terms of, you never worked in a theater before. And your trade was being a librarian. You had a degree in library science, I gather? Or something like that?
Yes, that's right. I was.
So where did the ideas come from? Are you just naturally creative?
I would say, I think people describe me as being a more creative type of person and an idea person. I just, come up with a lot of ideas, and, biggest problem is say you come up with 20 ideas, but maybe you only have the time to do one or two of them. But in terms of ideas, so it would come from just being an avid moviegoer, and
you've been into a lot of different theaters.
Going to a lot of different movie theaters and being a nerd about it and noticing details and noticing which each theater does differently, and loving theaters that are grandioso and well financed, as well as theaters that are kind of scrappy and rough around the edges. Like I love all kind of movie theaters. I love going to multiplexes. I really enjoy. I see movies at the Cineplex in the Landmark in town.
Yeah.
So I just love going to the movies. And being nerdy about it. Having been kind of a collector, I would say like a collector of movie going experiences. And also, I obviously I love watching. I love cinema and I love watching films, but I've also never aspired to be a filmmaker. And that's the thing. A lot of people, they'll say, "Oh, movie theater. Did you ever go to film school? Did you ever, were you ever interested in making films?" And I can say never. Like I've always identified as a movie watcher, somebody who, is part of the audience. And my interest is whatever my creative instincts are, they're not really so much around creating what's shown on the screen. It's about creating a good audience experience. And so, I'm always what I like as an audience member. I figure other people might like what I like, but I'm also just, particularly having done this for over 10 years now, I'm constantly paying attention to what other people enjoy about movie going, what movies other people want to watch, and appreciating that, people have different tastes and preferences, and being attuned to what they are.
You alluded to this.
To feedback. Yeah.
Right. You alluded to this a little earlier, talking about people coming in to watch classic films. And they are aware that these films are available to them on television and they could watch them there, but they would rather come into a theater and watch these classic films inside your theater. And I'm wondering if, and I don't know if anyone's done any kind of study on this, but if you're sitting down at home and you're watching Netflix or you're watching Crave or any of the other streaming services, there is far too much choice. And you're sitting down and you spend more time clicking through the movie choices than you do watching the movie. And I'm wondering if that has an impact on people deciding, I can't be bothered, let me go to the theater. I don't know if that's a thought, but to me it makes sense.
Yeah, I know there's the phenomenon of like the paradox of choice, that often if you give people more options to choose from, they have a harder time making a choice. And often people will the anxiety of choosing among 50 options or 1,000 options, the anxiety leads people to just not make a choice at all. Whereas if you give people, kind of a thoughtful menu of 5, 3 or 5 or 10 options, it's much easier for them to be like, okay, I know I can pick the movie I'm going to like the most, or I can feel confident in my choice. So I think giving people kind of fewer options, but at the same time constantly rotating options, that does make it easier for people. And of course too, like we, when choosing the movies to play, it's not like I'm always just trying to play the movies that will make the most money. Play movies that I think our audience wants to see. And there's a lot of films that we play that aren't necessarily hugely profitable to play, but we're playing them for the prestige, or because out of a sense that like, if only 25 people ultimately come to see this film, maybe there'll be a few people for whom this is the best movie they see all year, or this might become like one of their favorite new films. And just knowing that a special movie might have that impact, that makes it worthwhile to program. And so that's a very different programming rationale than, what a cinema chain like Cineplex operates with.
When you pick movies to bring into the theater to show folks, you talked about having movies that were in the Cineplex and you brought them downtown for a second run or whatever the terminology is. How do you decide what percentage of those big blockbuster movies you bring into your theater after they've been out of the Cineplex, as opposed to classic films or what we might call art films? Do you have a certain plan in the back of your mind that says I'm going to play 30, 30, 30, or, percentages? Do you get that detailed on that, or is it just gut instinct a lot of the time?
So that's a good question. I guess it's not like we necessarily have quotas or percentages for that proportion. In the movie theater business, you kind of have to make hay while the sun shines, and our schedule is very much determined by like which movies are in theatrical release that we're allowed to play within a particular window of time. Which movies are fresh and aren't available to watch at home yet. So often, that does mean sometimes our movie programming might be a little bit more lopsided towards being very mainstream in one week or extremely arty another week. Although we do try to each week have a little bit of something for everyone. Now, when it comes to those, say the more mainstream second run films we play, one unfortunate reality that we deal with as a small business is that the multiplexes, they get first dibs on any movie to play, and the distributors, since they're the biggest customers for the movie distributors, the distributors just always have to accommodate them first. And so if the Cineplex wants to play the film and or the Landmark wants to play a film, they'll be able to open it in Kingston, and then we just have to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait for them to finish playing it before we can show it. So trying to think, good example. And sometimes too, we wait so long that the movie comes out on streaming by the time we're allowed to show it. So like a movie like Elvis, the musical that came out in the summer, like that's a film that like we know our audience is interested in, but I believe it played at the Cineplex for 8 weeks first. So we got to play it in week 9. And by the time we were able to show it in our movie theater, I think you could rent it for like $6 online. So anyway, so that's annoying. So it does mean that, when we're playing, these larger, bigger scale movies, that we're not playing them in their initial, when they're the freshest and have like the highest interest from moviegoers. But we are the only movie theater downtown. So we're bringing them downtown, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I'll wait to see it at your movie theater," because they, prefer the experience that we're offering. Now, hopefully that will change. I don't know how much ranting you want to hear from me, but I am, I think I'll just say that the influence that Cineplex is able to have in the Canadian theatrical industry is incredible. They own 75% of all of the movie theater screens in Canada, 75% of all the box office revenue in Canada. For any company that's distributing movies in Canada, they need to make that, Cineplex happy, or face Cineplex's retaliation. And so, there is their influence. It's very kind of they do things that are just outright, like anti-competitive and in violation of, anti-competitive laws and regulations in Canada. So anyway, so there might be some changes. Hopefully there'll be some political action, some changes on that front. But for now, we sometimes have to wait a long time to play movies at our theater.
How many theaters like yours are there across the country, independents?
Hundreds. There's hundreds.
Yeah.
You would be surprised just how many little independent movie theaters there are in Canada. But they range hugely in terms of what kinds of businesses or organizations they are. So I will say there's not a whole lot of theaters that are quite like ours, because that's right, in terms of there cities that are large enough in Canada that can support like an independent art house theater downtown. There's there's only so many cities that have busy and active enough like downtown cores to support a theater. But you can look at Waterloo has the Princess Cinemas, London has the Highland Theater, Guelph has the Bookshelf. Those are some comparable cities in Ontario that have theaters that are a fair bit like ours. When you look at the big cities, you have some really cool, you have independent theaters that tend to be operating out of like historic single screen movie theater venues. Like there's the Fox Theater in Toronto and the Paradise Theater in Toronto, which is stunning. Review Theater in Ottawa, of course, there's the Bytown and the Mayfair. In Vancouver, there's the Rio Theater. So a lot of the time, in terms of in bigger cities where you can, in downtowns where you can see independent theaters, continue to operate in the 21st century. It's because they're like the stewards of like an old historic building, and they're able to do programming, often calendar programming, that's like super attuned to their neighborhoods and to their areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
when you talk to the people who come to patronize your film screens, do you get some sense that they will come up to you and say, can you get more movies featuring this actor, or can you get more movies directed by so and so? Do you get that kind of feedback at all from any of the film going public at the screening room?
Feedback. Let's see. Well, actually, when it comes to feedback, we play so many new films that I think a lot of the time when it comes to a movie that's in theatrical release, it's it's like any good and there's actually any kind of audience demand for it, there's a pretty good chance that we're going to show it. But yeah, people tend not to ask for more movies so much by director or actor. Often there'll be a particular movie that they've heard about on the horizon. Like there's maybe a documentary that they've heard about that played at TIFF that's got an amazing review in the Globe and Mail, or they've heard an interview with the filmmaker on CBC, and then people will say like, or it's a film that's related to kind of a personal cause or concern, having to do with food security, and people email and say like, are you going to play this movie at the screening room? And often when it does come, a lot of time we do have, through these suggestions, we'll have some of these smaller films put on our radar, and then we'll actually go ahead and play the film that maybe otherwise would have slipped through the cracks if someone hadn't suggested it. But yeah, I guess with classic films, though, we're always looking for people's suggestions. It's funny, in the past we've had people ask for us to play more anime, and so we're playing more anime, and it's doing really well. But yeah, we love getting film suggestions from people. But yeah, it seems like people. I'm actually. We don't get a lot of criticisms of our program, which is good.
Well, that's good.
It's when people don't actually come and buy tickets or they're not interested. But people are. I think we. My motto is trying to please all the people all the time. Which is a very tough way to operate, and it absolutely does not work out. But I think that does serve our programming well, just in terms of I think we really punch above our weight class in terms of the variety of films that we play.
Okay, last question. The film buff that you are, give me a couple of your favorite movies that you've seen over the years, having seen so many of them.
It's terrible. It's a terrible question. Well, favorite. Well, the thing is, I guess I believe it's not so much about the movie; it's about like the movie watching experience. I just thinking offhand, like the film Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. The first time I watched it, I was just judging the film and scoffing and rolling my eyes. The film for being too kind of romantic and sentimental and too much just like this commercial in a way. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, oh my gosh, this film, it's transcendent, it's beautiful, it's amazing. And it all just depends on kind of your mindset and the setting and the context. In terms of some of the big classics, like, Vertigo, I saw it at the Ridge Theater in Vancouver by myself. And that was I previously watched it on a laptop. And I liked it when I watched it on a laptop. I thought it was a good film. And then when I rewatched it in the theater, it was first a disappointing experience. Actually, I left the theater kind of unhappy. But then as I was walking home and thinking about the film, in terms of trying to repeating an experience, something clicked into place. And I was like, that was profound. And even though it was just, it's funny. I think it's neat when a movie does that to you, where sometimes the actual experience of watching the movie is not great. And if you were to ask the person while they're watching the film, halfway through, would you rather pause this film and watch something more entertaining or a reality TV show? Be like, yeah, I'm kind of bored. I don't know if I like these characters. This isn't gripping me. I'll just go watch something more entertaining, right? I mean, a lot of the time when you're watching a movie in the movie theater, honestly, if you ask people halfway through the film that maybe they'd rather watch something more entertaining, maybe this is the art films. This really is actually what applies to art films most.
Yeah.
You're like, this isn't, maybe I want something more low effort, or they never select the film in the first place. But then at the end of the film, there can be this huge payoff, or even the payoff isn't until after the film when you're thinking about it or the film's gotten out into your skin. And then in retrospect, you're like, that was an incredible experience on some level that moved me. Maybe I'm going to remember that for years to come on some level. It showed me something new, or it made me think something new I'd never thought before. And yeah, I think it's only it's the cinema the cinema building, cinema experience that allows you to have that kind of encounter with art. And I think, streaming, where you always have the remote control in hand and you can always pause it or flip away. It just can't. It really. I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't really do. It can really prevent, when it comes to having those kind of encounters with great films, it can really do something that's not in the best interest of the movie and not in the best interest of the movie watcher.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was the last question, but I have one more. If we're looking down the road a few years, where do you see the screening room going? What sorts of plans do you have in the back of your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously the pandemic was really rough, and I can't believe we've gotten this far into the conversation without talking about, COVID and the impact that it's had over the past 2.5 years now. But I will say, obviously I did a lot of things that very existential, and I've done a lot of soul searching, and had a lot of time to think over the last 2.5 years. And I previously, before COVID, had been very kind of optimistic about the trajectory of the theater, because our business increased year over year. And then COVID was, terrible. And I was very skeptical as to whether people would even return to the theater, or whether people's habits were just forever changed, and whether the whole, theatrical industry would be forever changed in a really bad way. But business is actually really recovering. Like, as of the summer, things have really started to pick up. I think more younger people than ever coming to the theater. Older audiences, as you can imagine, have been a lot slower to return. Although that's not to say that we don't have a lot of older customers that are bought their membership cards and are attending regularly. But yeah, so business is recovering. I know we're not going to go out of business unless there's another pandemic. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I'd like to do more screening events where we're able to host, say, like a discussion around the film, like have a guest introduction or an in-theater discussion, almost kind of like a book club discussion afterwards, or bring in special guests to do Q&As after films. And particularly interested too in just having just opportunities for people to talk and connect in the theater around a particular film. I'm interested in having people who are performers of one kind or another do kind of performances before or even during movies. Something you see happening in some of the bigger cities. You'll play a film that's maybe not terribly good. Then you have like a comedian or a drag queen providing like live color commentary on top of the film. So it's like kind of like a comedy audio commentary track that you see on DVDs. And that's so cool, where you have both this, the film is being shown in the cinema. It's an event that can only take place in the cinema, but you have somebody who's like brilliantly funny who lives in that city. Like to find some of these people in Kingston who can then do their thing with the film.
Or you could have a silent film and have somebody playing the keyboards during the film.
Oh yes, and we have
like they used
done
to do.
that.
Oh, have you? Okay.
So yes, actually in the past we did that in May, and then again actually just earlier in November. Had 2 silent film weekends with live piano accompaniment by Bruce Vogt. We've also had Spencer Evans do live soundtracks in the past, and we look forward to bringing him back in 2023. Yeah, and that's very very effective, because when it comes to old silent comedies, they were absolutely made to be watched with a full audience full of people laughing at the film.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Now, if people want more information on your business, where can they get it?
Just Google Screening Room Kingston and you'll find our website. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Have accounts there. Excellent. Thanks very much for your time today, Wendy. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Great. Thank you. Good chatting with you, Dave.
Our guest in this episode has been Wendy Huot, the owner-operator of the Screening Room, located in downtown Kingston, Ontario. To those listening, thank you, and we'll talk soon.
Theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast at gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.